Okay, can you hear me well? Great. That's not my slides. Wait a minute. Here it is. So thank you, everyone. Good morning, and thank you for being here. My name is Tim Carey. I'm a software engineer at Algolia, and today I'm going to talk about how you can build a search engine using only CSS, and why would you ever want to do that. But first, I want to start by saying that I'm really happy to be on stage here at the Off Conf, because Off Conf is one of the very first conferences I ever attended, and it's still one of my favorite. So I'm really happy to be here on stage with you, sharing this talk. First, need to explain. Maybe some of you were here at the last Off Conf 2 years ago, where I explained how you could build flags of the countries of the world using only CSS and one div. This is pretty similar, and this is how you can hack CSS into a search engine, because it's not really what CSS is made for, but it's really about hacking. And I'm not talking about hacking in finding vulnerabilities and exploits, but this definition of hacking I really like and really relate to. It's how you can overcome the limitation of a system to achieve new outcomes. In this context, the system and its limitation will be CSS, and the new outcome will be a search engine. We need to understand what exactly a search engine is. And in its most simplest form, a search engine is just a machine or a function that will take keywords as input and will give you results as output. That's what it does. A good search engine has more features, and for me, a good search engine has 3 main strengths. It should be relevant, of course. The results you have should match the keyword you inputted in the first place. It should be fast. You should not wait to have your results. And it should be intuitive. As a user, you should understand how to use a search engine instinctively. So this is what I wanted to build. And I'm going to show a live demo of how you can do a search engine in CSS, something that is working, and the rest of the talk will be more explaining about how you can get there. But first, I also need to explain why would you do that. In my case, it's because I'm working in a company where we expose a search through an API. So in April of last year, we decided to do an April Fool's, a joke. And we announced that we just released our new API client that was made entirely in CSS. We had a dedicated website. We even announced it on Product Hunt. We made it a really big release. And we went way over the top on the content of the website, saying that it was everything was in CSS, so you did not even need JavaScript to run it. It was an API client that was not even calling the API, meaning that it could work completely offline, and a lot of other bullshit revolution like this. But we also had a live demo, something that worked in a very specific context. But it was a way to muddy the water and have people wondering, is this for real or not? It's not for real. We do not have a CSS API client, do not ask. But we have a live demo that actually works, and that's what I'm going to explain. So bear with me while I'm doing the live demo, because live demos. So I have my... Yes. OK. So this is the list of all the Algolia employees at the time of the demo. And you can actually search into the list through their first name, last name, or job titles. So if I'm searching for Lucas, for example, I have all the Lucas in the company. I can even filter if they are part of the product team, or if they are part of the design team. I can search. I'm not in it. I can search for myself as well. Tim Carey, I'm here. And as you can see, it's fast. The results are updated as I am typing. That was what I was looking for. It's relevant. It's finding what I'm looking for, and quite intuitive because it's highlighting the results. I type team, and the word team is highlighted. There are a bit more feature. If I'm looking for my GitHub handle Pixelastic, I can still find my profile. And more interesting is it even handles typo tolerance. It's when a user is making a mistake in what they're typing because maybe because they're typing too fast and they don't really know how something is spelled. So if I search for Niolas instead of Nicolas, it still finds all the Nicolas and correctly highlight them. And all of that is done through purely CSS. So let's see how it actually works. To really get into the mindset of hacking, you really first need to understand the limitation of the system you're trying to use. So my system is CSS. CSS is an awesome language, don't get me wrong, I really like it, but it's a language that has no variables, no loops, no function, no regex. All of these building blocks you would expect from any other programming language. CSS does not really have them. Well, you have some of them, you have some variables and regex, but they're more of an afterthought than something that was in the language in the first place. So when you're building something as complex as a search engine, you might wonder, how can I do that if I don't have all those building blocks? And that's the trick about hacking, is you should not focus your attention on what you don't have, but instead you should try to find the main strengths of the system you actually have. So what is CSS good at? In my opinion, CSS is really good at selectors. Selectors are extremely powerful in CSS. You can select elements through their ID, their class, their attributes, based on where they are in the markup compared to their parents, but also compared to their siblings. And you can combine all of this. This means that you might have the most dirty and unsemantic HTML web page. You will be able to craft a CSS selector that will target exactly what you want. And this is, for me, the main strength of CSS. From a large pool of choices, all your HTML elements, you will be able to target specifically the ones that are of interest for you. Which is, when you think about this definition, selecting only relevant items from a large pool of choices, it's also what you would expect from a search engine. You have many different results, and you are only interested in the few selected relevant ones. So by using the strengths of CSS to build a search engine and focusing only on that, we will be able to do something. So in the rest of the talk, we will go together slowly through how to build it. It will start with a pretty easy markup, and it will get more and more complex until the end. But this is the base markup. So I have a search bar, which is just an input with a pre-populated value of team. And I also have an empty div with an ID of result. So with this, I can add some more CSS on top of it. If I add this, it's select the input that has the value team. And the lowercase I, you can see here, mean that it's a case-insensitive match. So even if I'm all lowercase here and I have a team with a capital letter, it still matches. And I set the background to blue. I can select an input based on the value. I add the tilde selector that will allow me to select another element that is after it. So if the value of the input is team, then the result that is after it will be colored blue. On top of that, we add a third CSS selector, which is the pseudo element before. Pseudo elements are a way to add textual data to your elements that are not here in the original markup, but that you can add through CSS. So what it does is, if the value of the input is team, then the element result that is placed after it will have its content sent to team carry, and I'm also adding some background image to add my face. So this is the basics, the core principle of how the whole hack is working. I was pretty happy when I get to that stage because I had something working. It was really great, except for one little drawback, that it does not really work that way. The thing is, when you first load the page, your value is empty because you want people to actually type whatever they want in the search bar. You cannot pre-populate it. And the thing is, if they type something here, well, nothing is happening. This is because CSS is actually reading the HTML attributes, and the HTML attribute that we have here is value, and value is still an empty string. When you're typing something in an input field, it does not update the underlying HTML attribute. It does update a dynamic value that you can read through JavaScript, for example, but it does not update the markup that CSS relies on. So how do you do in that context? Well, the answer is pretty easy. You use JavaScript. And I know. I said there's no JavaScript involved. It's pure CSS and so on. But you have to keep in mind that what we were building was an April Fool's. It was a joke. our goal was to make people believe something that wasn't true. And the best way to do that is to actually lie to them. So we say there's no JavaScript, and no one checked. So we could, oh, you're not seeing my next slide. We could get away with that. But to be fair, the only JavaScript we added is this on simple line. It's an on-input handler. So it means it will trigger every time you add a new character in the search bar. It will read the dynamic value through this .value, and it will manually set it to the HTML attribute through setAttribute. So now when I'm typing something in here, something is updated in the actual markup. So when I'm typing Tim, the CSS is matching, and the result is displayed. So I know many of you are really clever people and really smart people in this room, and you will find a way to do that without JavaScript. So come to me after the talk so I can remove this one line of JavaScript from this presentation. The second issue is that it works for my use case because I'm the only one named Tim in the company, but we have many people named Alexandre in the company, and I wanted, when I was typing Alexandre, to find all of them. So a markup with only one empty div would not work. I needed to slightly update the markup so I could display several results at once. The markup is just slightly updated. Instead of one empty div, we are actually adding one empty div per employee. So around 150 empty divs. There's nothing inside, just all have a unique ID, but they're empty. We will be adding the content through CSS through the before pseudo element once again, by alphabetical order. The first one will be Aurora, the last one will be Zoe, and we will have all the Alexandre in between. But we will hide all those elements by default. They have a display none, they're not displayed. We will only conditionally display them based on what is typed in the input. So when you type Alexandre in the input, the result 15, 16, and 17, which are the Alexandre, should be displayed. All the others are still hidden. In real life, it looks something like this. Just imagine that on the right, what is grayed is actually invisible. And when I'm here and I'm typing Alexandre, the Alexandre are highlighted, meaning they are displayed. You might have felt it what I was doing this demo, but I had to type all the way up to Alexandre, up to the last letter, which is not really convenient. It would have been much better if just by typing Alex, I would have had all the results already. This is something we will need to add. This is also the moment in doing this hack that I realized that, okay, I have a proof of concept that is working in CSS. I have something that works already. But now I need to really understand what do I want to build. I want to build a search engine. And so I need to understand how a search engine actually works because it's much more complex than just matching one word to one result. Luckily for me, I work in a company where we do build a search engine, so I could just ask my coworkers to explain the internals. And what I understood is that every search engine is made of two parts. There's the searching and there is the indexing. Elasticsearch, Solar, Lucene, they're all based on these two parts. You cannot do a search engine without these two parts. The searching is the one you, as a user, you use every day when you're confronted with a search bar. You're asking yourself implicitly a specific question, which is, what results will I get if I type Alex, for example? I type something, what are the results I will get? But when you are on the other side and you are actually building the search engine, you have to ask yourself a very different set of questions. For every potential result in your dataset, you have to ask yourself, what should the user type to get this result? What should the user type to have Alexandre displayed? And so you start making a list. I want Alexandre to be displayed when I type Alex. Fine. But I have many other people in the company whose nickname is Alex. We have Alexandra, Alexandria, Alexander. I should be able to find them all just by typing Alex as well. And it's not just Alex, actually. Every character that will lead to Alex, Al, should display Alex as well. And all the way up to the end of the complete first name. So you start to make a list. And this list of strings you're creating where you're adding one more letter every time, in the search engine world, it's called an n-gram. So you're generating the list of all the n-grams that will lead to a specific result. And once you have this list, you just need to write it in CSS like this. So if the content of the input is A or Al or Ale or Alex and so on all the way to Alexandria, then you should display the div that is the one matching Alexandria. It's a lot of CSS, but it works. But the thing is, you need to do that for the first name, but also for the last name and the job title, because I want a match in everything. You need to handle some edge cases of accented characters. One of my coworkers is named Sebastian, with an accented he. But not everyone had this letter on their keyboard, so I still wanted people to be able to find it by typing Sebastian without the accent. So I needed to generate new n-grams for him with the accent or without the accent. You also need to handle the synonyms. That's how I was able to find myself typing pixelastic. It's just a new set of n-grams that will lead to me being displayed as a result. And you need to handle the typo tolerance. So this effect when people are typing something that is not exactly the name. So from all the previous n-gram you generated, you start to generate variations. You remove one letter or you swap two letters together, and you put that back into your CSS. And you have to do that for every single employee. So it makes a really, 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 really large CSS file. But it works. And you have a search bar where you type pretty much anything, and you have results coming up. Here I'm searching for Mar, and I have everyone that whose first name starts with Mar. We have Marie-Laure, Marion, Martin. You have everyone that is part of the marketing team, and we have Karim, whose last name is Matra, because there is some typo tolerance involved in here. So it works really well. It was really satisfying for me to see that I could type pretty much anything and have relevant results coming up. But there is one issue with that, and it has to go with the relevance. I have many things displayed, but it would be much better if they were displayed that way. It's the exact same set of results, but instead of being displayed in alphabetical order, they are displayed by relevance. I defined that a match in the first name was more important than a match in the last name, that was more important than a match in the job title, and so I order results based on this. Luckily for me, there is a pretty easy CSS rule to do that, because all my displays are in a flexbox context. I can use a CSS property that is called order, and then can let me reorder stuff. So if the query is Mar, then the ID number 16 should be first, and the number 8 should be second, and so on. And you have to adapt that to every single n-gram based on where the match is occurring. I'm going to finish on one last thing, which is the highlighting. Highlighting is something that is often overlooked in search engine, but in my opinion, it's something really important. It's your way as a search engine builder to explain to the user why your result is here. If you do not have highlighting, even if your search engine is really clever and will display the most relevant result, if your users do not understand why this result is here, because there is a match in the description or a match in the title somewhere, they will think that the relevance is bad while it's actually good. So it's really important to explain why your result is displayed. And I decided to do my highlighting by bolding the matching characters. If you remember how I'm doing this, to display the name of the person matching, I'm using the before and the content. But here I need to highlight the first 3 letters of this content. And this is content I already added through CSS, so I cannot style something that I already added through CSS. So how could I do that? Once again, the solution is a bit of cheating with custom fonts. What I did is I was taking the original font, the non-bolded one, and on the side I also took the bolded font, and I extracted all the glyphs from it, and I reincorporated all these glyphs into the original font in a specific namespace. UTF-8 has a namespace that is called the private use area. It's a range of characters that are not used by any language. It's here so you can put your own custom glyph without overwriting any of the character that could be used in another language. So what I did is I took all those custom glyphs that just happened to look exactly like the bolded version of what I needed into this area, and then I could reference them in CSS using their CSS code points. It's absolutely unreadable, but this first code point is a capital M, this is a, and this is a R. And I guess you see where I'm going with all of this, but you have to do this for every single n-gram you ever generated. So it's keep increasing the file size. In the end, I ended up with the 8 megabyte file size, just for 150 employees. I managed to minify it up to 5. But the funny thing is, of course, I did not write any of this by hand. I have a Ruby script that does everything for me. Running the Ruby script takes 200 milliseconds, but running the minifying on top of the generated CSS takes 5 minutes. And this is where I'm going to stop this talk. There is something I would like you, there are 2 things I would like you to remember from this talk. The first one, and maybe the most important, is that please do not ever use that in production. It's really not meant to be used in production. It's a proof of concept to see how far you can go with CSS. It's an awesome learning exercise to know more about CSS on one hand and to know more about search engine on the other. If you need search on your website, there are much better ways than doing it in CSS. Still, yes, it's written on my shirt. Still, it works in a very specific context. I don't think it's worth using in production. If you have ideas of how to use it, I'm still open to discussion, but in my opinion, 8 megabytes of CSS for anything, it's just a no-go. And the second thing, as I was quoted before, is that impossible only means you haven't found the solution yet. In our case, when we started building this, we knew we wanted to do some April Fool's joke and having something that have people wondering if it was real or not. Our first version was just using animated GIF as background image to make believe it was working. And then we said, oh, maybe we could do something with, we could add some highlighting by doing this, and we could display several results by doing that. And we started splitting what looked like a really complex problem into smaller parts and fixing them one by one. And we would never have imagined going that far when we started the project. So I would really encourage you to try crazy stuff like this. Hacking does not have to be useful. Not at all. This is not useful, but you're taking a framework, anything that is really good at doing one thing, and you try to make it do something different. And it's really gratifying, and I really encourage you to take whatever language or framework or whatever you're using and try to make something crazy with it. Of course, everything is open source. You can try it live, algolia.com/css/demo to see how it works. If you try to inspect the source, your browser may or may not crash. You use at your own risk. But everything is in the repo. So as I say, it's a Ruby script that takes a JSON file as input and will output a CSS file. So you can actually replace it with your own data and add CSS search on your own data. And that's it for me. If you have any question, feel free to ask right now or after during the breaks. I would be happy to answer any question you might have. Thank you very much. Question over there.
Just one question. How do you get the idea?
Because of the company I'm working in, we see search every day, and we're always thinking about how can we improve search, how can we do search, how can we do this. And with some of my colleagues, we are talking about all the crazy stuff people are doing with CSS. Some people are building 3D games out of CSS. Some people are doing really crazy things, and we're thinking, is there something we can do related to search? And we started brainstorming about this, and we had a smaller proof of concept, and then the idea came like, oh, it could be great to have a joke for the April Fools doing that. But it started really small side project with 2 of my coworkers, and it went all the way to a website and a product launch release and everything. It was really fun to do.
Second question.
Sure.
When you get the idea, did you ask yourself, where am I going?
Not really. I knew many of the CSS properties I'm using here. It's not thing I'm going to use in my day-to-day life of integrating things in CSS, but I knew they existed because I read articles on it, and I never had the chance to use them. So I thought it could be a good occasion to try them. But it started really from, I went to a point where I said, okay, I'm done with the demo, it's working well, okay, there's no typo tolerance, but it's okay. And then a coworker said, oh, you could do it that way. And I was like, oh, yes, I could do it that way. And I started coding more and more. But I had no idea where I was actually going. I had no idea I could go that far.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you actually try using CSS classes also? I mean, because in CSS classes you have kind of regex and stuff like that.
So the regex in CSS are pretty limited. You can do a match if it starts with something, if it contains something, or if it ends with something. It didn't really work in what I needed to do with the typo tolerance, like one letter is missing and so on. I did not find a way to do that. I'm using a lot of IDs to do all the selection here. At first, I wanted to be even more crazy and have absolutely no class nor IDs in the markup and do everything through ends child selectors. But the performance were really, really bad. Every time I was typing something in the search bar, it would take 10 seconds to display. So I switched back to IDs for the selectors, which is much, much, much faster.
And for the JavaScript part, did you try a form submit? I mean, it's not as nice as actually type ahead, but you could actually append the search.
Yeah, I tried that. Like you type something and you press enter, and it reloads the page with the query already pre-populated and all the CSS working. It works, but you lose the instant effect of having everything displayed as you're typing, and I really wanted that.
Okay.
But that's a good idea.
How long have you write by hand the CSS file before writing the script?
When I was trying to make the highlighting work at first, I did a few demos manually I tried to use the before element and an after element. One would be using the bolded version and the other the non-bolded version. I would try to position them side by side so it looks okay. But in the end, when you have a match in the middle, you cannot really do that perfectly. So I realized it was not a good idea. And I was like, okay, there will be no highlighting. I'm moving to something else. And then when I think what I did is I wrote everything by hand while I was searching in only one employee. And the moment I added several of them, I wrote the Ruby script to do it automatically. And the good thing is that the Ruby script is unit testing and TDD testing, and so it really works.
Thanks.
Hi, I really enjoyed the flag.
Thank you.
I was there. Don't take my remarks the wrong way, but are you being paid to do that?
So, CSS flags was a completely side project on my own time, not part of my job. This was when I was a developer advocate for Algolia, and this blog post we did was for a really long time the most viewed blog post on our blog and generated a lot of signups. So yes, I was getting paid for that, and it really worked okay.
No more question.
Thank you very much, then.